Hi everyone, this is block number 3 for March in our Jelly Roll Block of the Month Challenge. This block is called Sticks and Bricks and I hope you're going to enjoy it. If you'd like to join in on this challenge, check in the description right under this video. You'll find a link for my Facebook group where you can find everything you need to participate. Let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is select 6 strips from your jelly roll or strip set. You want them to be different colors. Try to get as much contrast as you can in them. And you're also going to want a 7th strip. That strip should be white or the lightest color in your set. Now that you have your 6 strips and your white strip or very light strips selected, we're going to do the cuts. So from your lightest strip or your white strip, you're going to cut 4 2.5-inch squares and 2 strips that are 2.5 by 6.5. That's from your lightest color or your white color. From your next color up on the scale, something a little darker, you're going to cut 2 2.5-inch squares. Choose your next strip and cut 4 2.5-inch squares. Another strip, 4 2.5-inch squares. Here's a darker strip I selected and I cut 4 2.5-inch squares. So there's all our 2.5-inch squares. We'll just put that aside. Then from your last 2 strips, each one you're going to cut 2 strips that are 2.5 by 6.5. So that's for the last 2 strips. So altogether you've done 6 strips that are different. Try to find colors that contrast so that in the block they pop. They don't look like you're using the same thing for every square or strip. So try to choose colors that are contrasting or that there's a lot of difference between them. And don't forget your white strip or your lightest color strip. Okay, so let's lay out this block. So from the 2.5 by 6.5, I'm going to choose 2 strips. And in the middle of that, I'm going to put a 6.5-inch white strip. I'm going to repeat the same thing at the top on the right. But you don't want to put these 2 colors together. They match. So let's do on the top right exactly what we did here so that these are different. That you're not having 2 the same touching each other. So we'll put this strip in the center. There we go. Now we don't have anything too close together. Okay, let's lay out our 2.5-inch squares. So we have a dark blue and a dark blue. We have a dark blue and a dark blue. I'm putting them opposite each other so nothing touches. I'll use my white. You don't want to put the white in the center because look, it extends the strip and that will ruin how your block turns out. So you want to make sure that you space these away from the white strip in the center. There we go. Let's choose something different here. We'll choose this one and put it here. Choose this one and put it here. And then from these we'll put one here. One of my, remember the lightest that we only cut 2? We'll put that in the middle. This one here and these two here. So that's how we lay it out. So you have 9 2.5-inch squares and 3 6.5-inch strips on each side, and they are opposite each other. So to start, I'm going to sew these together using a 1/4-inch seam, and I'll be back and we'll sew the 2.5-inch squares. Okay, so I've sewn my strips together to make the bottom of this side, and I've pressed my seams towards the inside. I decided to go towards the inside because on the top I'm going to do to the outside, to the inside, to the outside, and I want to be able to nest the seams. So on the strips I've pressed towards the inside. We'll put that there. So now we'll continue with this top. We're going to sew 3 squares together, repeat for the middle, and repeat for the bottom. And then we're going to take our top, sew it to the center, take our bottom, sew it to the center, and we'll have this block or the square completed. So let's go ahead and do that. And here's my first top little row. I've pressed to the outside. And don't forget that you want to be really consistent with the size of your seams. You don't want to have a scant 1/4 inch, then a 1/4 inch, and some are almost 1/2 inch, and the block will never work out that way. Your seams will never line up. You won't be able to nest your seams properly. So you want to be very careful about making your seams consistent, and press, press, press. Don't be afraid of that iron. The more you press, the flatter your block, the better the results. And the center piece is pressed towards the center so that we can nest our seams beautifully when we assemble the block. And this is our 3rd little row. Here's our 3rd row. And again, I've pressed the seams towards the outside. Okay, so now we're going to sew these 3 rows into a square. So we're going to line up our seams. We want to be very careful about nesting our seams. So if you can see this, I've got 1 seam to the left and 1 seam to the right. And I'm going to join them right there very carefully to make sure that my seams line up. If you can see that, my seams will line up perfectly. I don't always use a pin, but in this case I will. And we'll check the second side, make sure everything is lining up perfectly. So we get a nice square block with perfect seams. Put another pin in it. I'll sew this one together with a 1/4 inch seam right along, and I'll come back and repeat the exact same step for the bottom. Okay, you can see that my seams line up, and on the back you can see that they go towards the inside and towards the outside, and that's how we can line up our seams. So we're going to take the bottom and bring it up, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to nest our seams, make sure they line up really well. You can feel that they're flat, and that's how you know that the corners are lining up. Just put a pin in it there, and we'll check this one, make sure it's lining up, put another pin in it, and we'll do that 1/4 inch seam. So I'll press it towards the middle like I did with this first seam. So there we have the top half of the block sewn together into our 6.5 inch square. Now we're going to attach the top and bottom together. So once again, you want to make sure that these seams line up right here. So you're going to be careful to nest those seams. Again, I'll make sure it's flat, and I'll put a pin in it to keep it in place. Pin on this side. I'll sew that with a 1/4 inch seam and press it, and I'll be back to show you that this half of the block is finished. And there we go. The left half of our block is done. So now we're going to run through the exact same steps on the right side. We'll sew our 3 strips together. Remember to keep these colors opposite. You don't want to put the same ones together, always opposite, so you don't lose the look of your block. You'll do the 3 rows in the 2.5 inch squares and then sew them together into a block. Remember to press between every seam and nest your seams to make sure you get nice clean squares and nice crisp corners. So I'm going to get this done, and then we'll do the final step and sew our block together. So I've prepared the right side of my block, but before I sew it together, I wanted to point something out to you. You want to make sure that you don't line up 2 colors together. So you don't want this block to be this way and you have 2 matching colors beside each other. You want to keep the block more random than that. So you want to make sure that matching colors are away from each other. Nothing is lining up. And you definitely don't want like the white to be right under the white, because that will extend this strip and you'll lose the look of the block that way too. So I have to sew these 3 rows together and then sew this side together. So I'm going to do that. I'll be careful to nest all my seams because I want to have really nice clean points on this block. I'll get that done and we're almost finished our block. Put a pin in it to make sure it doesn't move. Pin on this side also. And we'll sew that 1/4 inch seam. Okay, we have that square done. We're going to nest our seams up at the top and sew this half together. Just feel they're flat. You'll know they're well nested. Okay, a 1/4 inch seam, and again we press. And here we have our second half. So now all we have to do is sew the 2 halves together, and as you can see, you have only 1 seam to nest. It's kind of easy because you have a strip here and a strip here, so it's not like you have a seam to nest at every intersection. You only have that 1 seam to nest, so this will go together quite easily. Just get it really well nested. Make sure your seam is lining up really well. Put a pin in there, keep it in place, and I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch seam and press, and I'll be back to show you how it turns out. And here we are. Here's our gorgeous block. I love this one. It's fun because we spend a lot of time doing nesting and learning to make straight seams and nice crisp corners. So it's a fun block to do. I like the mix of colors too. It makes it really interesting. So just remember to press all your seams. Sometimes I see blocks that I think they look a little off, but it's actually because they're not pressed. So we can't see the block really well. We can't see how nice the seams are done and how well it's laid out. On this block, I need to clean up a little bit along the edges where I'm off a little bit, but I'm not going to square it down to size until I finish all the blocks in my sampler, in my quilt for the year, so that I can make sure everything is consistent in size when I put it together in the end. So I hope you're going to enjoy doing this block. Once again, it's called Sticks and Bricks. I think it's really fun. Don't forget, if you're not already participating, you'll find a link to my sewing group in the description right under this video. Thank you for watching.